Hello everyone and welcome back. Today we're going to do a kit bash build on a Conrail BH1D Ballast hopper. I'm going to show you how to do this step by step through the entire process, so sit back, relax, and enjoy as we build this car. All right, so let's go ahead and let's get into this here. This is a BH1D. This was a car that Conrail got brand new in the early 80s, I believe. These were actually like an Ortner style car. And that's actually what we're going to be using here as our basis for our build. We're using the Walthers 40-foot Ortner aggregate cars. And we're going to modify them so that they make a good stand-in for our ballast hopper here. Now, here you can see we're starting the disassembly process here, and I'm just taking the wheel sets and the couplers out. Also, while I'm pulling the wheel sets out, I'm replacing the wheels themselves with tangent wheels, and I believe this had plastic couplers on it. I'm also taking these screws out of the bottom here that hold the underframe out there, you guys can see, and then the weights are in the ends of the car here. We're going to take those out as well. As you guys can see, you got to kind of fiddle with them a little bit because they kind of get stuck in there pretty well. Now what I'm doing is I've got a long blade here on this, I don't know what you call that, like a knife or a saw or whatever you want to call it, maybe like a hobby saw or something. And I'm starting to work along the bottom edge of the car here. It's in the best angle. There you go. You guys can kind of see there's that molded edge at the bottom of the car, and I'm using that and just kind of working very slowly and kind of getting a little like cut in there so that way I could cut flush with the bottom of the car. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I try to get that as good as I can there and just kind of keep working that a little bit, kind of work the one end, work the other end, and just keep fiddling with it. This can be a bit time consuming, but again, when you're cutting the bottom of this, a lot of times the saw is going to walk a little bit because it's such a long piece. It's going to kind of bow and stuff, and the bottom's going to be a bit of an uneven cut. But my main concern is that I have the edges flat, and if I cut anywhere, I cut up into the car, and I don't leave like the bottom bowed downward or anything. So just got to take your time with this and just keep fiddling with it. The main thing is to take your time when you're first starting to cut. That way you could get that nice smooth line on the bottom of the car and not have it be uneven or anything. If you do goof and you catch a little bit of the bottom edge, it's fine. You know, we're going to end up covering up that a little bit later here, so it's not a super big concern. But either way, once we get all that done there, I'm going to take my little sanding black deal and I'm just going to sand the bottom of the car. I just want it to be fairly flat. As you guys can tell, it's not perfectly flat. That's just kind of the way she goes there. Now, the next part we're going to do here is the ribs on the side of the car do not match the Conrail styling ones at all, and I don't think any manufacturer's actually done a car that they do. I think it was Hobbytown of Boston had a car that was similar. I think it was Hobbytown of Boston. I don't know. You guys comment down below what the other manufacturer was that did these cars back in the 90s, but the main ones that are available are these Walthers ones. And with those ribs and the spacing all being wrong on these cars, I kind of take the approach of I'm going to shave all this ribbing off because we're going to put a real thin piece of styrene sheet over the entire side of the car to cover it. So when you're removing these ribs, it's not really super important to necessarily get them exact or anything. You just want them to be flush. If you go and you get a little excited with the chisel blade and you end up taking a gouge out of the side of the car, it's no big deal because we're going to cover all that up anyhow. That's also why I didn't remove any of the decals or the paint from this car. I just left it all on there. It's getting covered up anyway. I don't need to worry about and spend all the time and hassle getting all that off of there. So just, slowly working a little bit at a time. Obviously, I recommend using a fairly new chisel blade to do this. Nothing worse than trying to do this with a dull blade that you're fighting with the sides of the car. So just, keep a fresh chisel blade on there. And then obviously another really important thing, you always want to practice safety when you're doing this kind of stuff, and make sure you're trying to always put the blade away from you and away from your fingers and where you're holding things. That's very important. You don't want to cut your finger open. We've all done it, I'm sure. That's just part of doing these kit bash builds. Another note while I'm thinking of it here, when I did this, I actually did 4 of these cars at once. So you guys might notice a different car number in one shot versus another. That's because I was trying to get 2 different camera angles for when something didn't look good on one camera, I go flip over to another. So just a forewarning, I forgot to mention that earlier in the video here, but there is 2 different cars being worked on at the same, essentially being videoed, just to make for better angles and better things, etc. Now, when you take some of these ribs off in the center, you'll notice there's actually holes in the side when you get the rib flush, and that's for those center divider pieces. So that was another reason that I ended up going with the complete recover sheet of styrene. Just because you could take all the time sanding and doing all the sanding and putty and spend forever in a day trying to get this side flat when you could just take a sheet of styrene, put it on there, and it'll be flat. So I try to keep things rather simple and not be fighting with things too much. So I just took the simple way here and just went with the sheet styrene. Now, obviously, pull your center pieces out once we get the outside done. I always like to leave those in until I get all that worked on the outside, because it keeps the car more rigid. Now, what I'm doing is I made those marks on my board there so that way I could kind of use that to make my styrene sides here. And I'm not big on using like tape measures and all that, because I always seem to goof things up. If I can just like make a mark on something and use that, I'm going to go with that route. So you can see I cut my sheet out to match the length. I left it a little bit long on purpose so I could come back and trim it down as needed. And then you can see the resourcefulness of CR Steve here. I'm using my old cutting mat there to be a straight edge for this, because it just happened to be there and it was the best piece to use. So I'm going ahead and I'm making both sides here. And sometimes what I do is I'll take one I already cut and I'll use that to kind of line myself up and make the next one. One thing I recommend is whenever you're doing a kit bash like this, I normally try to do a few of them at the same time. That way it kind of makes the process simple, whereas if you're doing one at a time, you only do things once, and if you want to do another one, it's a bit of a hassle to try and remember and get everything back together. But here we got our plastic welder going on. Just put that on there pretty good. I mainly focus on trying to get the edges and the sides the best. I just want a little bit in the middle just to hold it good. And then of course we're cutting our sheets for the bottom. Here, just simple eyeballing it, not really too concerned about it being an exact perfect thing, just trying to eyeball it. One thing I'll note about this is I didn't realize this until I was on like the 3rd or 4th one of these I did after I filmed, of course. You could actually just take a sheet of styrene and cover up the entire bottom of the car. It won't interfere with the weight piece in the middle. The weight piece will basically just sit right on top of it, and it's perfectly fine to do that. I kind of wish I would have done that when I did these, but for any of you that think I'm perfect and I know what I'm doing, I don't always actually know. I'm just kind of winging it and trying to figure things out as I go here. You can see that piece was a little bit on the narrow side, but it's fine. You're not really going to see that, so I'm not really going to sweat that. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put my weights back in the bottom of the car and put my underframe on there. Now, another note with this build is this is going to be a looks close enough kind of build here. If you wanted to, you could actually cut the ends of the car out and redo the weight design and all that. And actually, because the ends on these cars actually like bowed in a little bit and had some detail stuff in them, some brake rigging, etc. But I chose not to do that, mainly because I didn't think of that when I was working on this. And maybe in the future I'll do ones like that, but I wanted to keep this build kind of simple, something anybody can do. Now, on these cars, they only had the one center section bay piece there, as you guys can tell. And just put that back in there in the middle. We don't need the other one. And right here, I'm taking my knife and I'm using the molding on the end, like on the end of the shell, the original factory molding, to kind of as a bit of a guide to cut that thin styrene there on the edge to fit. Now there's our styrene we're using for the ribs. That's 8404. It's a 4x4 HO scale. Got the strips. And again here, we're keeping it simple. I literally just put that on the side of the car, eyeballed it, cut it, and now I'm going to cut, I believe there's 11 ribs on the side of the car. I'm going to cut all 11 of them right now. And just kind of get them all in a big pile here. So that way I could sit here and I could start putting them down. I like to start with the center one because if you look at the top of the car, you'll be able to tell where that original center rib was in the factory car. And you get that one in there first, then I'll do the ones on each end. Just kind of get those going off of eyeball, the prototype photo to get the spacing right, etc. And then with the rest of them, as you guys can see, I'm cheating here and I'm using one I already did, but the first one I did, I just kind of put the 4 of them in there and I eyeballed them until they looked about like they were evenly spaced, and then I very, very carefully put some of that plastic welder on there and weld them in place. Now you guys can see they're not perfectly straight, they're not exact, but you know, that's fine. That's I'm not the type to rip my hair out trying to do, you know, minute exact measurements. I just want it to look close and be happy with it. You know, at the end of the day, that's one thing about this hobby is you have to find what you enjoy doing. And I know some folks are crazy about getting it exact and perfect, and they're getting the micrometer measurements of infinity on there, you know, to get it exact. And I'm just not that guy, you know, and that's just not the way I am. And for any of you out there that are the same way, shout out to all of you, because, you know, we got to enjoy what we're doing here. And the bigger thing is that in this hobby, sometimes we get a little bit too caught up on being perfect, and we miss the cool things you could do that aren't perfect that still are awesome. Now, back to our topic here. You just saw me trim up those ribs on the side edges. And right now I'm putting the ballast doors on the bottom. I believe these ones are from, oh gosh, who the heck did I order these from? I think they might have been Circus City. Might have been Circus City, I believe I ordered these from. Let me check that real quick. Alright, yes, these are from Circus City Decals. They're their 34-foot ballast hopper conversion kits. That was what I used for the ballast hopper doors, they're 3D printed. Now, for our handrails here on the end, this is where it gets fun. I chose to just redo a few of the railings and leave those center sections intact. As you guys can see there, right now I'm drilling out the holes. I think that was like a 070 drill bit. I went a little bit bigger than what you should, just because I don't like trying to fight to get those handrails put in place, because any of you that have done the work with wire handrails know that you'll spend all that time bending it and getting exact and getting it right, and then you gotta try and fish it through like a 70 or 9 or an 80 hole, and it's just, you end up bending it and deforming it, and you end up, you know, kind of wasting all the time you put into getting it right. So I put them a little bit bigger, and I use CA glue anyway, so normally the CA glue will kind of help fill in the holes, so it's not too big a deal if it's, you know, a little bit wonky. Again, I'm trying to keep this to where anybody can do this build. I don't want to overdo things. All right, there you can see I'm using a micro brush to just make my bend in the wire there. And just literally, guys, just simply eyeballing it. Just putting it on there. But I'm doing a little test fit here. And kind of once you test fit it, you know if you got a take any off. You got, if it's too long, too short, etc. You figure all that out. Got some CA glue on each end, and boom, it's on there. Now what I'm working on here is this end handrail. And why I chose, like, if you really wanted to take this all out, you could take those end handrails completely off and completely redo them as like one piece with stanchions and all that. Honestly, I just didn't feel like taking off those handrails because I felt like they're going to break and try to drill out those stanchions. I don't have much luck with trying to drill out plastic stanchions, so I elected just to go ahead and remake these end corners when I did it, because that was kind of more the, that was more what was wrong with it. And then two, it just seemed to be a bit of a simpler path of least resistance here to do that way. Because how much are you really going to stare at those end handrails? Not very much. So we got those on. Now we got our freight car ladders from Titch Train Group, of course. I noticed on these cars they all had these ladders on the end of them, so this was the simplest thing I could find to use, was these ladders from Titchy. And you can see them just eyeballing them, getting them kind of about the right size and putting them on there and gluing them in place. And boom, they're on there. Alright, now we got the putty. So when you take the factory handrails off, there's like little holes in the side of the car. Some of them, if you're lucky, you could kind of, when you go to pull that handrail off, you can kind of cut the where it goes into the car flush, and you'd be fine. But unfortunately, some cars didn't work out like that, so I'm taking a little bit of the old putty and just trying to get it in there, just to kind of fill in those holes so we don't have the blank unfilled space there. But just gotta put it on there with the blade and just kind of flatten it on there. Oh, look at that, there they are. So there they sit. We're gonna head over and we're gonna get the coat of paint on them here next, but that's what they look like without the paint. Remember I was talking about the ribs aren't straight and all that? Well, how much do you really notice it looking at them? And unless you really sat there and stared at them, you're not gonna see it. So I went with this cold gray paint from the MiG ammo line there, and it was a little bit on the lighter than I wanted side, but you just kind of gotta go with what you can. Cars always tend to darken up when you weather them anyway, so it's not that big a deal if it's kind of light. These were almost like white, but it is what it is. I am still happy with how they turned out. I would recommend, if you're going for like a newer looking, like a as delivered kind of thing, I'd go a slightly darker shade, and then you could just do the decaling and all that fun jazz. But since I was going for that late 90s thing, I kind of went with the lighter shades. That way when I did the weathering, I could use the weathering to darken it up and get that whole look to it. But when I paint these cars, I always paint the bottom side first. I'll let that dry, and then I paint the top. And the reason I always do it that way is when you paint like just from the top pointed down, there will be spots that you can only hit from the underside. So I always start with the underside and then hit the top. My main focus here is everywhere on the outside of the car. I don't really care about painting the inside of the car, and that's because we're going to end up painting that with rust colored paint anyway, so it's not really too big a deal. So I'm just trying to get the outside done up. Now, we got our paint done, so I'm going to take my dummy trucks off. These are just the ones I use for painting, and of course I got my KD 158s I'm going to put on there. But whenever I paint stuff, I throw those, they're just like an old set of plastic 70-ton trucks with plastic wheels on them that I use for dummy trucks for when I paint. So we're going to get our wheels and couplers back on, that way we can start moving on to our decaling portion of our process here. So this is where it gets fun. We got some decals from old Circus City there. And I used a bunch of decals with these. They're from these ballast car decals from Circuit City. I used the microscale covered hopper set there. I also used a loop plate from microscale. So I used a lot of different decals to do these, but that's because there's no commercially available decals for these cars. So you just kind of got to work with what you got and pick whatever you can off of each different decal sheet and go from there. A lot of what I was doing with these cars, I was just finding decals that were close and going with those. Again, you could sit there and rip your hair out trying to find the exact decals or spend a boatload of time getting custom decals made. Old Steve just wants them to be close, because close is going to be good enough for a lot of what I'm trying to do here. I don't need to drive myself nutty getting it exact. Of course, if I could get exact decals, I would, but going through the whole process, having custom ones made, I haven't really wanted to go down that road just yet. Maybe down the road we'll look into doing things like that, but right now I just want to get them looking good. And you can do that for the most part with a build like this, with just going off of what's already available. So here we're using all those little black lettering and all that. That's all from the micro scale set. Just various different hopper labels and things of that nature. I'm just going off of a prototype photo and trying to find things that are close and using those to do the car. And I don't think any of them are exactly right, but they're close. And there's, of course, our CR going on there. Used all of the numbers and the CR fonts from the Circus City set, because it had a lot of 5s and 1s in the ballast car numbers, so that was what I went with. But just kind of a little bit at a time here, one decal at a time. And decaling is always one of those things that I'm sure I'm not the only one out there. You guys comment down below when you go to decal something, you just kind of lose your mind trying to get one number straight, and then you put another number next to it, and now that first one doesn't look straight anymore, but it is straight, but it's not straight. And you're just I love when I get done with a car how good it looks decaled or a locomotive. But that process and sitting there for an hour fiddling with one number over and over and over again trying to get it right just makes you crazy sometimes, and that's always been a bit of a challenge for me is doing that. But the end result always ends up being worth it when you're doing a custom build like this, or doing a custom locomotive. Just anything to have things that you numbered and did yourself is always worth the extra hassle and effort there sometimes to do all that. So it looks like we just got to put our weight data on there, and then we're going to be moving right on along here in a minute. As you guys can see, I showed both sides of the car on this. There's those two. And now we're back over at the paint booth. Now we're going with a little bit of rail brown along the bottom, the ends, the sides, that whole jazz. Just throwing the rail brown on there, you know. And now we got our rust here, our Badger Model Flex rust, and we're just going to absolutely bomb out the entire inside of the car with this rust colored paint, because these ballast cars hauling stone just kind of tended to get rusty in them over time. So now we got our panel line washout from MIG and some thinner. Of course, got to have enamel thinner to use with the wash. Now you just see we're just kind of, you know, working it on there just a little bit, you know. Just want to get some good grime there on the seams of the car. You know, sometimes you go a little heavy, sometimes you go a little there. We want a little bit heavy, and we just keep on brushing that around until we get it about how we want it. Oh, we got the brown paint. I'm sure you all know exactly what time it is right now. It's time to paint our wheels. We're going to paint the inside and outside of the wheels. Just get that brown paint on there. It's one of the things that drives me nuts is when people don't paint their wheels. Paint your wheels, folks. Paint the inside and the outside of the wheels, please. Just paint them, please. But we'll paint our wheels, we'll paint our couplers, we'll get all that done up there, and then we're going to be closing in on the home stretch of this build here. So there, ooh, look at the painted wheels. Alright, now we've got some more. We got some light rust this time, and I'm going to use this on the chutes off of the ballast doors here down the bottom. I'm just putting some on. You guys remember we got some rail brown on there. Well, I'm putting that rust over the top of that, and then you saw me kind of come in with the Q-tip and wipe a little bit off. That's just to create some variation there in our levers, or in our spot there. Now what I'm doing is I got that Micron pen there. I'm blacking out some of the capacity data, because that's what you gotta do. But that's gonna do it here. After this, I'm just gonna put a coat of lacquer on there, and boom, there it is. That's our finished car there on the layout. I ended up making some loads with the actual ballast I used on the layout and some scrap foam. I just cut the foam out to fit in the car, and then I glued some ballast to it. So there you guys see it. This is going to be our first ballast car build. The next one will probably be out in a few weeks, which is the car to the right here, right side of the photo. But as always, everybody, I'd like to thank everybody for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask me down in the comments section on this build. And I'll see you guys in the next video.